Hello, Zero Books readers. It's me again, Douglas Lane. I'm the publisher of Zero Books and the voice behind our podcasts and videos. This week we'll be discussing free speech, Lindsay Shepherd, the anti-social justice warrior industry, and the specter of white nationalism, all through the lens of Angela Nagle's Kill All Normies. Recently, a former guest to the Zero Books podcast announced that she was no longer a leftist.
So, I really, what I want to get across is that I in no way want to be associated with what the left has become. I'm not a leftist anymore. I would not call myself that. Does that make me right-wing, or does that make...
This video will largely be about this development. Lindsay Shepherd gained fame after she was reprimanded for showing a clip from the Canadian television program The Agenda. The clip featured a conversation between Jordan Peterson, Nicholas Matt, and Mary Rogan on the subject of gender pronouns. After the complaint, Lindsay clandestinely recorded a meeting with her advisor and a diversity officer where she was told that she might have violated Canada's Human Rights Code by showing the clip. During the meeting, she was also told that certain views are simply beyond the pale and must only be taught in order for them to be refuted. Her claim that she tried to take a neutral stance was, according to her advisor, a part of the problem.
I was not taking sides. I was presenting both arguments.
So the thing is about this is, if you're presenting something like this, you have to think about the kind of teaching climate that you're creating. And this is actually, these arguments are counter to the Canadian Human Rights Code.
Since the incident, Shepherd has become a very vocal champion for free speech, organizing free speech rallies and events at Laurier's campus, while simultaneously becoming a darling of what I like to call the anti-social justice warrior industry. She appeared on GadSad, Louder with Crowder, The Dave Rubin Show, Rebel Media, and many other podcasts and YouTube channels. She also appeared on the Zero Books podcast to discuss not just what happened to her at Wilfrid Laurier, but also just how she was being embraced by a right-wing anti-social justice warrior industry. I mean, you're entering into a fray, though, that is complicated and kind of ugly. I have this paternal instinct, like, watch your step, Lindsay, watch your step.
I don't feel co-opted. I don't. I still, and a lot of people, you mentioned I did an interview with The Rebel, and the same day I did an interview with CBC, CTV, Global, but of course the only thing that matters is that I also happened to talk to The Rebel that day.
Yeah, and the thing about that is you didn't go on their show. That was an on-the-street interview. You were on the street, and some reporter from a YouTube channel came up and asked to ask you questions, and you said, sure. I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really not trying to smear you as all right. You know that. I'm just saying, it's important to, even though the left doesn't do it very well, it's important to look at the left's arguments that do exist, maybe only historically at this point, and consider the people who are championing free speech most loudly right now, consider their full ideological, political perspective, and not just this one issue, because I do think that a lot of people on the right, like, for instance, Tucker Carlson at Fox News, is completely opportunistic in his embrace of the free speech issue and is not to be trusted even on that issue, let alone overall.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm lecturing you, so my apologies. So now Shepherd has announced her departure from the left, and it's tempting to rewrite history, to decide that she was maybe a crypto right-winger from the start. Maybe she intentionally triggered her advisor into reprimanding her. Maybe her whole story is fake. A false flag, even. I don't think this is the case. Rather than plunge into paranoid conspiracy theory, we should try to remind ourselves what the current cultural moment is. In her book, Kill All Normies, Angela Nagle quoted the journalist Thomas Frank, who, after Trump was elected, wrote, "We liberals bear some of the blame for the right-wing emergence, for the frustration of the working class, for their blighted cities and their downward spiraling lives. So much easier to scold them for their twisted racist souls, to close our eyes to the obvious reality of which Trumpism is just a crude and ugly expression. The reality that neoliberalism has well and truly failed." Now, this might easily be misinterpreted as meaning something like, the reason Trump won was because liberals were bad, maybe even just as bad as Trump. But that isn't what Frank was saying. What he was saying was that the establishment's efforts to manage global capitalism had failed, and instead of facing the depth of the crisis and its consequences, the establishment was preferring to change the topic. Our present moment is one in which the majority of regular people can feel how the system is failing. They know that it is failing them in particular, and those who are in charge of the system have no answer. It's a moment that requires the masses to think for themselves, but which provides very little in a way of institutional or material support for sustained and engaged thinking. Instead, we are encouraged to react. After the election of Trump, there was, in certain sectors, an impulse to think, to discuss, and to try something new.
What did they think was going to happen? People keep saying to me, how did this happen? They're dumbfounded, but it's so simple. The left did this. This is my fault, people like me. When are we going to learn? The left have given up putting any argument across at all, to the point where Clinton is considered left, liberal. On many issues, Theresa May is less right-wing than Clinton. That's just a fucking fact. And yet my friends are on Facebook saying, I'm with her. I'm fucking not. Oh, but she's better than Trump. Sorry, that's not good enough. Clearly.
But simultaneously with this, there was a general tendency to reduce any and every call for open and free debate into a thin and reactive pseudo-call for free speech that easily morphed into new calls for censorship. I think understanding why this impulse to promote free speech has been subverted, how rather than leading to anything remotely like an open debate, most organizing around free speech has ended up merely solidifying people's preconceptions. We need to understand that the free and open marketplace of ideas is not, in fact, in any way free or open.
As a leftist myself, that is, an anti-capitalist, I have to start by acknowledging the correctness of the premise that there's basically no such thing as free speech. There's no free marketplace of ideas because some idea mongers have more purchasing power than others or a better position in the idea marketplace. Markets don't produce equality and never have. In fact, they produce massive inequality. Look around. Check out some wealth and income distribution data. In this context, I do find it difficult to deny that the free speech argument is a comforting illusion, a cover for the fact that powerful interests determine who can speak and who gets heard and by how many. Here's a personal example closer to our topic. As a supposed free speech advocate, I myself have been the beneficiary of numerous speaking invites, sometimes with quite nice honoraria attached, to events where there are not infrequently lavish catered dinners where you get served expensive things like filet mignon. Because I came to realize the free speech agenda is a well-funded one, with various foundations, often libertarian/conservative ones, funneling money from donors whose politics align in not uncomplicated ways, i.e. anti-regulatory economic policies, with this idea and not other ideas. The other ideas don't get the filet mignon. Look, I fully believe there's a fatal anti-intellectualism sweeping American campuses that has to be addressed, and much of it revolves around identity politics and campus cultures that increasingly favor feelings over intellect. When I see videos of demonstrators at Evergreen or Wesleyan saying they don't need to read books because we know what our experiences have been, and shouting down faculty, I too want to blame identity politics. But that's to be as simplistic as the students who want to shut people up who offend or trigger them.
Up to this point, it's easy to agree with Kipnis, but then she says this.
At the same time, all speech and all ideas don't have a place on campus. There are intellectual standards to be maintained and principles to uphold, and most importantly, the most important one is that campuses are inclusive places, not venues to debate whether blacks or Muslims or trans students deserve social equality. Those debates have been settled. If student Republicans want to invite alt-right and edgy neo-fascist speakers, they can invite them to off-campus venues. If it were 1932, would we invite Joseph Goebbels to campus to debate whether Jews and homosexuals should be removed from Germany on the principle that good speech will obviously trump bad speech and all ideas deserve a hearing? No.
So with this question from Kipnis, we return to Lindsay Shepherd. Kipnis asked us to imagine ourselves in 1933 Germany. She asked, would those of us who believe in free speech invite Goebbels to debate whether Jews should be removed from Germany? Kipnis answers with a reflexive no, but perhaps the question is too abstract to make any sense. For instance, there were hate speech laws on the books in the Weimar Republic, but whether these laws slowed down or sped up the rise of Nazis is contested. And some on the left are adamant that holding with the idea that there should be free speech even for hate speech is the most consistent left position there can be on the matter.
I don't think the way to deal with neo-fascist groups is to try to shut them up forcefully. You should try to win the argument. It's quite remarkable to see how it works. So take, say, Holocaust denial. In a lot of Europe, Holocaust denial is a crime. In France, there are laws against it. You can't do it. In the United States, it's not a crime. The consequence is that in the United States, Holocaust denial is unknown. There's plenty of it. You know, there's professors, tenured professors at universities who have published books denying the Holocaust. Nobody pays any attention to them. It's ridiculous. Forget about it. It's just crazy business. In France and a lot of Europe, it's all over the front pages. Ton of publicity. You know, some guy somewhere does some marginal thing. Everybody knows about it. It's a way of giving publicity to Holocaust denial. If you treat it the sensible way, it's about like somebody claiming the earth is flat. Okay, forget it. It has no impact. I just don't think it's even tactically the right way to deal with, say, neo-fascist groups. And it does give them an argument. As you said, they can claim freedom of speech.
In the course of that demonstration, one professor was actually hurt and had to go to the hospital. Joining us out in Boston, Mary Ann Marsh from Washington, Katie Tapper.
There's an argument for allowing even the most noxious views to be aired, an argument that I think is convincing enough. Namely, that the only way we can determine the truth or falsity of even the most ludicrous and or noxious ideas is to thoroughly examine them and debate them. Till we've heard all the arguments for why the earth might be flat, we're merely standing on dogmatism when we insist that it is round. Until we have listened and understood, we just don't know the truth. That being said, however, we have to keep Kipnis's point about the free market of ideas in mind. The truth is that not all the arguments are being heard. The digital media environment is not an open arena for debate, but is a hyper-segmented and extremely hierarchical series of tubes.
The internet is not a big truck. The internet is a series of tubes.
Let me try that again. When somebody like Gad Saad or Dave Rubin advocates for open debate, they just don't mean it. They don't mean it. Not only are they not interested in having their views challenged, notice that Rubin has never had anyone on to debate classical liberalism, but the real goal isn't communication, but the development of an audience. The time it takes to get to the root of problems, rather than skim the surface of them, militates against the kind of conversation that are needed in order to get to the truth.
Like, my one degree is in mass comm, whatever the fuck that is. My degree is in English. I mean, I could have gone to Amazon and just bought a classics collection. Dickens, Emily Bronte, just read all those. Boom, would have been done. Why did I have to go to fucking school? Because everyone has to go to school. You need an education. No, you don't. You don't need to be smart.
Now, I can't read Lindsay Shepherd's mind. I don't know what she really believes. But while there are defensible arguments for allowing someone like Faith Goldy to speak, arguments for allowing her to speak at a university even, when your idea of free speech means that you select speakers on the basis of who will piss off liberals the most, when you not only allow your story to be used by the alt-right, but embrace the anti-social justice warrior industry, an industry that has nothing to do with creating platforms for open debate, where arguments are explored all the way to the end, but instead are content to regurgitate the same talking points about blue-haired feminists and triggered college students ad infinitum, or at least until the clicks dry up, not only do you end up pushing reactionary and racist rhetoric, but you also undermine the basic notion of free speech. Shepherd's exiting from the left is neither a surprise nor a major loss. But the way the notion of free speech is being trampled and warped by the right is a real tragedy.
Principal will call you right after this appearance tonight. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Thanks very much.
Well, Evergreen is just the most recent and the most obviously egregious case of the left trying to enforce absolute ideological conformity on campus. Now, some lawmakers are taking affirmative steps to protect the First Amendment. In 10 states, bills have been introduced or passed to protect freedom of speech on campus or to punish students who attempt to suppress the right of others to speak freely. Seems relatively non-controversial. Scott Ross, though, was the director of One Wisconsin Now. He opposes these laws, and he joins us. Scott, I don't know if you saw the interview we just did, but it was with a self-described progressive on the campus of Evergreen who has been physically threatened because he has a different view. And this kind of thing is happening on a bunch of campuses, and I would think that sincere liberals would be upset about it and would be trying to fix it, but they're not. Why?
Well, Tucker, first of all, thank you for having me. And there is nobody who should defend violence or threats or disorderly conduct, but I don't think that the bill we're seeing, particularly here in the state of Wisconsin, meets any of those thresholds. What's happening is we have a coordinated effort to try and suppress free speech by government on University of Wisconsin campuses to intimidate students, faculty, and administrators from discussing critically important issues facing the public policy debate.
I don't know who writes your talking points. I mean, do you live in this country? Are you watching what's happening on college campuses? I mean, a lot of them, not just Evergreen and Berkeley, but lots of campuses where people stand up and they're like, I disagree, and they're shouted down and people threaten them. That's a real thing. That's not a creation of this show or Fox News or the right. I mean, that's totally real. Why aren't you upset about it?
Well, what I think is this, is that we have in the legislation here in the state of Wisconsin a potential solution that is infinitely worse than the alleged problem. You have the hand of government coming in trying to intimidate people from speaking out on campus. Now listen, our college campuses have multiple jurisdictions.